and welcome to our second panel with Michael Bobbitt and Michelle Aguillon. I'm Tim Bermudez Sanders. I'm the head of Change the Stage. Eliana?
I'm Eliana Ulloa. I'm one of the moderators for this panel.
Michael?
Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Bobbitt, Artistic Director at New Repertory Theater.
Hello, my name is Michelle Aguillon, theater artist, teacher, and coach.
Sweet. Now, before we dive in, I'm going to start with a native land acknowledgement by Adrian Wong. Since our activities are shared digitally to the internet, let's also take a moment to consider the legacy of colonization embedded within the technologies, structures, and ways of thinking we use every day. We're using equipment and high-speed internet not available in many indigenous communities. Even the technologies that are central to much of the art that we make leave significant carbon footprints, contributing to changing climates that disproportionately affect indigenous peoples worldwide. I invite you to join me in acknowledging all this, as well as our shared responsibility to make good of this time, and for each of us to consider our roles in reconciliation, decolonization, and allyship. Now.
So acknowledged, so acknowledged.
All right, so let's just dive in, shall we? Oh, hold on. All right, my first question to you is, what does intersectionality look like in season programming?
I'm happy to jump in. I actually have a hard time with the word intersectionality, and mostly because I also think that many people don't really quite understand the initial definition of the word. So intersectionality is when multiple sort of labels or oppressions are amidst one person. Like for me, I'm a Black gay man. In the gay community, I'm Black. In the Black community, I'm gay. And those two things can't ever be separated. And that's what intersectionality means. Often when in the race equity conversations nowadays, when people talk about intersectionality, they really talk about how different intersections of people come together in one space. And sometimes that is a tactic to distract us from talking about race. When we really want to be talking about race, questions about homophobia come in, questions about women's rights, trans rights, all these other things come into the room when sometimes the initial conversation is about race. So what I would say to you to respond to that is that as I am trying to program New Rep season, and actually as I was planning New Rep season, I wanted to make sure that there was no show that we were doing that was going to deter people from coming, that all the stories had a universality about it, and that if the story wasn't about people of color or females or gay people or whatever subsect of person you want to talk about, that when I put the teams together to work on those shows, they represented that community, all those communities. So that's sort of how it comes to play for me. And then beyond that, then it becomes my job to make sure that those people are represented in the audience. So once I get the teams together, I feel like my job switches to being PR, where I'm just out on the street, getting people excited about the work that we're doing and the stories we're telling.
Sure.
Similarly, I mean, I'm honestly new to this term. And when you first posed the question, I was like, oh, I've heard this, but I don't think I've actually applied it in my own life, not consciously anyway, not, with that label, for lack of a better term. But I looked it up, honestly, and it's a cross-section of how someone identifies, right? Very much what Michael just explained. As to how I would apply it to my season, hopefully we have one, is it's something I've always done. It's something I've always practiced, is to always make it as diverse as possible. Not only bringing the most talented people I possibly can, but also collaborators, right, of different experiences, of different backgrounds, of different ethnicities, of different genders, because I value everyone's point of view. Of course, it depends on the story you're telling, right? If it's a show that's distinctly Asian point of view, I hope to get as many designers on the team to contribute to that come from that perspective. You don't always get that in Boston. It's a struggle, I would say. And whenever I come across, say, an Asian stage manager, assistant stage manager, designer of some type, I always hold them really close because I hope to call on them again someday to work with them. So yeah, to go back to that term, it's providing some type of diverse collaborative community within the production. I always strive for that.
I see.
And I sorry I had to move my
No.
white husband and my Asian child were making too much noise in the kitchen, so intersectionality in my family. But anyway, Michelle, please share those artists with me. We have a
Yeah?
policy at New Repertory Theater that at least 50% of our artists have to be people of color. That's our policy.
Absolutely will. Happy to.
Great.
Sorry.
You like my pink lighting that I now have?
Is it pink?
No, it's the curtain. I have pink curtains. You can't
Oh, it's
tell.
good soft lighting. Yeah.
Incredibly artistic. So sort of looking at that, I just want to hear your opinions on what are examples of theater recently that you feel are exemplary examples of successful intersectionality and successful representation.
I'll go first on that.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Sorry.
You go. No, go ahead, please.
I never know in Zoom, right? The first one that comes to mind, there's lots of them because it's happening a lot lately, which is so exciting. But the first one that comes to mind, because I'll be directing a Kate Hamill adaptation, is Pride and Prejudice that they did last summer? It was such a diverse cast, because it's traditionally, Caucasian actors, the British point of view. And the first time I actually saw that before was a few years ago in Seattle. It was one of the first productions of Pride and Prejudice adapted by Kate Hamill. And their Mr. Darcy was African American. I was so excited by that. And the sisters were a mix of Asian, Latinx, and as well as Caucasian, and that's very exciting. That to me is the new thing that we're coming into with casting, and it's so nice to see it finally happening.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because there's so many spaces in this world, especially in this country, that are not safe or don't feel safe for people of color, that we find an immediate connection when there is representation. I mean, I still do it. When I walk into the room or when I go see a play, I count the number of people of color in the company.
So do I.
It's true. And I think that's what's important for theater makers to understand, that is what's happening. That is what people of color do. We don't feel normally safe in situations. So when we are making that work, or when we are represented on stage or behind the scenes, we feel a lot more connection. And so many producers produce in what I call transactional relationships, where they'll do the Black show or the Asian show or the Latino show so that they can get those people to buy tickets. And those people will come because there aren't that many shows for us, so they'll spend money on tickets, but they won't come back to see the next show. And they won't become subscribers or members or donors or board members because they know that relationship is about getting their money for that show. And there's not much work happening elsewhere. So, I mean, I'm trying to think of shows I've seen. I'm still new here, but I saw Moby Dick was pretty mixed race cast.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, and then I can't think of the name of the show, but I saw something at Speakeasy. It was a musical about a gay bar that burned that had a mixed race cast, but I think those characters were based on historical characters. I know that, and not to toot New Rep's horn, but we successfully cast Oliver mixed race cast. Our actor that played Bill Sykes. Yeah, he played Bill Sykes. He was Middle Eastern. So yeah, I mean, I practice that in my own theater. In fact, now when I direct for theaters, I require that they commit to me that at least 50% of the company will be people of color.
Right.
Yeah. And to add to that from the other perspective, the actor's perspective, you probably remember this, Eliana, but I always tell my cast, especially when they're really young, don't just go for a role. Don't just audition for a role because you're right for it. You're the right ethnic type or the right age. Go for it because it speaks to you. If there's a Russian character in the Chekhov play that speaks to you, you're not Russian, you don't look Russian, neither is most white people that go to audition for that, right? They're not Russian either. I always say go for what speaks to you, and then it's up to them, right? Obviously, but don't pigeonhole yourself, very much like a lot of casting does.
Right. So
Diversity is good for business, y'all.
Finally, yeah.
It is. I mean, you're reaching groups of people that you never reached before.
Mm-hmm.
It's good for business if you do it the right way.
Yeah, agreed.
So we're talking about shows that are exemplary of intersectional casting, or kind of where we need to go in the theater industry. Is there anything that you think we need to retire? Like shows that are too regressive in their content or their subject matter to keep producing in their original form?
That's a hard one because, and I'm not a traditionalist and I'm not sort of prude in that way. There certainly are shows that are re-injuring, and no one should be re-injured. You think about a lot of those shows that were musicals that were written in the 50s where the Latinx culture were considered bad or over-sexualized. I mean, some of the shows that are huge in our canon, like Guys and Dolls, when they went to Havana, Cuba, and the Cubans were violent people and fights broke out, and Pajama Game. And I mean, there were so many shows where there was some sort of exoticism about going to a Latinx culture, and the people that were part of that culture were hypersexualized or hyperviolent. But anything I think that is that injures a group of people should be retired or rewritten. And I feel sorry when playwrights or publishers don't allow that to happen, because it's not okay anymore. I remember I directed a production of Aida, and when that show appeared on Broadway, they represented the two African races by casting Black people as Nubians and white people as Egyptians. Egyptians are not white people. They were never white people. And so when I went into the casting process of the show, I said, when I saw the first audition list, I'm like, why are there white people on this list? And they referred back to the original casting. And I said, well, we can't do that. We can't do that anymore. And I was happy to have other people of color be in roles of Egyptians and Nubians. For some reason, that seems to be okay. I think it's because of an equity thing. Like, until there's equity, you give roles to people that don't often have them. But the show came out beautiful. We had an all people of color cast, and it worked really well. And we used acting to separate the Nubians from the Egyptians, and costuming, a novel concept. But yeah, I think shows that re-injure people should change.
A few come to mind, but going on that that thought you mentioned about shows that portray people of color, either sexualized or violence. I think of shows like The King and I. Now, growing up, I loved that show. Didn't know the better of it, right? Fifth grade, watching that. Even younger, actually, living in the Philippines on a military base because my dad was in the Air Force, and that came on every year, and I would sit and watch it, having no idea how offensive it really was. And I remember being confused that the king didn't look Asian, but I accepted it like everyone else did. Or a lot of the wives, they seemed to be different types of Asians, or I don't know, I'm not sure. Certainly Rita Moreno is not. That was very confusing to me because had seen her in West Side Story. The King and I is a tough one, as well as like Miss Saigon is tough for me because that came out when I was still young and unimpressionable. I mean, impressionable, I should say, as well. And we loved the music, and you know, Asians were getting work, and it was great. And then all of a sudden, all the stuff that came in about, you know, how we were being portrayed was offensive, and that's tough because it's also work for Asian actors. You know, what do you do about that at the time? And now things have changed, and it's been rewritten and sort of reimagined, both those shows. And it's still kind of hard for me. Like, I'm not sure what to think yet. I'm going to be honest and say I'm not sure where I stand. I can see where it offends, and I can see where it's still a great show based in some truths. I mean, having grown up on a military base myself, several of them, you know, I kind of saw that storyline, Miss Saigon. You know what I mean? Like, I have family members that fit the stereotype that's in that show, so it's kind of hard for me. And my dad, you know, he participated in the Vietnam War, so it's I have a tough time with some of it, although I do get why some of it is offensive.
And
It is.
Yeah, and I wonder, Michelle, if we wouldn't be as offended by that work, which could be historically accurate or an artistic interpretation of history, if there was more work that was about the joys and the contribution of our culture. Because most of the shows in the canon about people of color, really most of the shows in the canon about marginalized people, are reduced to the thing that makes them marginalized. And I know as a black gay man, my whole day is not about being black and gay. I have other things I do, like laundry and whatever. You know what I mean? But where are those shows? You know? So if we had more shows that were about the celebration of culture and the contributions of people of color to this country, maybe it wouldn't feel as hard to see the one or two shows that are about the artistic interpretation of how bad the acculturation issues are, how bad racism is in this country.
Yes. Yeah, agreed. As far as the other part of the conversation about shows that should be retired, we talked about this the other day, Little Foxes, right? The servants in that play, the way they are written to speak is uncomfortable, but yet it was done recently. I never had a chance to go see it, but I wondered how they treated that. And how did Black audiences feel about that? I wondered. And then another one, it's a play that's done all the time, Odd Couple. They're too offensively portrayed Latinx characters, and I think they changed it again. I'm not sure. They keep updating it, so it's not so. And I still think it's offensive. It's certainly in a time capsule, and probably should just stay there. I bring that as an example because that's a very mainstream type of show, for lack of a better term. But yeah, I remember that very recently it was done, and I thought, guys, this is offensive. You know, but everyone around me seemed to be comfortable about it.
I had at my last theater, I had a very interesting, one of my last projects was very interesting. So I got the rights to the musical Big River to take this musical that was written for 30 people, and it was 3 hours long. I got the rights to turn it to a cast of 8 and make it an hour-long version. And I got Bill, what's Bill's last name? Oh shoot, Bill Hauptman, who wrote the libretto, to come back and work with us. What's very interesting about that project is we used a technique called consensus organizing, where we organize over 100 people in the African-American community to actually be in the room with us developing the piece, listening to the piece, giving feedback. Yeah, giving feedback directly to Bill Hauptman, who I think is late 80s. And what's interesting about that source material is that Huckleberry Finn, when it first came out, was sort of banned from sales and banned from libraries because white people didn't like how they were portrayed in this book. And Mark Twain intended for this book to be a satire. He wrote this as a comedy. He was deeply, deeply troubled that they let kids read this book because he thought it was too traumatizing for kids, the same way he thought the Bible was traumatizing for kids. But to have people, to have Black people in the room saying this book is inherently racist, as the NAACP said in the 50s, but we feel that it's valuable to tell this story, and we're going to tell you the parts of your play that need to be revised so that we can appreciate the history but not be injured. And so for months, we redeveloped this play, had workshops, invited them back. They gave so much feedback, and the show kept being tweaked and changed. Some of the best outcomes was we took the narrative text and divided it up amongst the 4 kids. So we made Jim the same age as Huckleberry Finn. So it becomes a best friend story.
Oh, so they're more like peers.
Yeah, so more like peers, like best friend story. And then we made Alice the servant to Mary Jane. We made her also a teen, which also, and so those 4 teens shared the narrative text that used to only be Huckleberry Finn. So giving more agency to the 2 other people of color in the show. We got rid of words like, we changed the word slave because it's no longer the right term. Enslaved people is the better term. It really became great. It became great. And I can't imagine going back and doing the other version of the show now that there's this 8-person, 1-hour version of Big River.
Wow, that's really good to know. 8 people, and you change the ages of the casting so that you have different perspectives represented, and they're peers of each other.
Yeah.
That is really great. I love that show when it first came out, and that's one of the shows where I thought, how does that play now? I don't know. I haven't heard it in a long time, but certainly that would.
Sold out. Could have run it for another month.
Wow.
The other cool things, we took Jim's song "Free at Last." We put it really early in the play and upped the tempo and made it an "I Want" song. And so it's not sort of a dirge at the end. It was very, very cool. I'm super happy about it.
Wow. Good to know. I wrote that down for kids programming because I
Okay,
work with
good.
kids programming. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, that's actually something that comes up a lot when talking about shows that should be retired. Is people will talk about like, oh, but like students need to be educated on it. And I was wondering what needs to change about the way that we educate young theater artists to look to the future and make sure that the future of theater is diverse and inclusive of different groups.
I'm happy. So I think talks about, and it's funny because I don't like equity, diversity, and inclusion necessarily when we talk about this. I like to talk about anti-racism, anti-oppression, and anti-white supremacy because I think those are really what we're talking about. And I think all that work is like major surgery. And so many people go in and try to tackle these issues without without educating themselves about what it is. And so I think it's incredibly important to keep educating our kids about what came before us so that they understand, because you're going to just injure someone if you go into this kind of work and try to change the system, but you don't understand why you're changing the system. You will re-injure someone, or you'll injure someone new. So I think it's important to expose them to that material. You're not helping them by sheltering them from the truth.
I agree. I had to direct To Kill a Mockingbird before it was recently updated, and there were children in our show, obviously, and the first read, a lot of the white cast were very uncomfortable about the N-word and several phrases and terminology from that time that's used in the play. And I already knew some of the African American actors beforehand. I had worked with them before, and we had tackled this subject matter before. And what they taught me in those previous those previous productions were just to embrace the word, acknowledge it, that it was used and why and how wrong it is. And I'm still learning, I'm still learning. And on this particular show, because of the discomfort of a lot of the white cast, they raised their hand. I mean, do you want us to say this word? When do you want us to say this word? I said, I want you to say it now. Say it in our read through. Let's talk through it, because they were uncomfortable saying it in front of the children. And I said, we can't hide it from them. I mean, they're in this play. They auditioned for it. Their parents, hopefully, I would find out later. But at that moment, I was like, gosh, I hope they knew what they auditioned for, what they've got themselves into. And even if they haven't, I felt that it was our responsibility to teach that across the board. Not only towards the children that were playing, their roles, but also address the fact that they were uncomfortable about the terminology and why. And I mean, you all signed up for this show. I mean, you knew what you were getting into. I mean, I'm not going to take the word away. I mean, we can't anyway, but just, as I agree, address it head on, because it is the way people used to talk. And why did they talk like that? And what did we learn from it? And how are we going to bring that forward? As far as your question, Eliana, I think I know when I was in school as a young kid doing theater, there was lots of things that I, as a student of a person of color, a child of color, we just accepted a lot of stuff that was racist or sexist. It was just social conditioning. You just sort of accepted it. As I've gotten older, obviously it's not as accepted anymore. And I think kids of this generation are being taught to be more aware of that stuff compared to my generation, which I think is a good thing. And I think it's great that all kids of all backgrounds are being encouraged to have a voice, to voice their opinion, their feelings about things. And hopefully there's a good mediator or instructor who's there to sort of guide them. And if not, because I know I don't know everything, it's great to bring in other artists of hopefully that background, that experience, to show us all the way, and that goes for even seasoned actors, right? I was directing a play that was about Vietnam, right? And it was, all the actors were about between 19 and 26 years old. They'll never see war. They'll never see it, right? But I felt it was really important to bring in Vietnam vets. We just invited a couple, and then it just turned into this thing that we had no idea just how many of these vets needed to talk about it, and that they could talk about it through these actors by sharing their experiences with them. How it was to be drafted, how it was to, even if they sat behind the desk during the war, they still witnessed a lot of horrific things through friends, or, they worked on a base where the body bags came in. It was just as traumatic for them as it was for guys that were out there, I believe that for any generation, particularly kids, right, it's all a learning experience for understanding the human experience, and therefore better telling those stories,
Yeah, discomfort is hard. Discomfort is so hard, and so many people would rather keep the status quo than be uncomfortable.
I like being uncomfortable.
I do too. Vulnerability is the key to happiness. I mean, I don't know how anyone can get out of pain if you're not going to share or work through problems if you're not going to be vulnerable about it. And so, and I get it. Humans by nature just do not like to be uncomfortable, but you tend to, when you do that, you tend to dismiss a lot of other people's, not even just discomfort, just the difficulty of their lives, because you just don't want to be uncomfortable for a few minutes.
Yeah, it feels like it's happening over there, so they don't want to talk about it. They think it's never going to touch their lives, so they don't need to deal with it. That's hard. That's hard.
I guess along that same kind of vein, do you have anything to say? And you kind of answered this already, but do you have something to say to people who are frustrated of fighting for representation and opportunity in the business? You know, people who are tired of people kind of like pushing their problems aside and not looking at them, like you just said.
Mm. Go ahead, Michael. I have so much to say.
Yeah, I mean, I
Those-
think it's the same tactic that we've been using all of our lives, is that when they don't let you play with them, you make up your own game. You know, I often, I often wonder, so there are many producers. My art is my art. Like, as a producer, I want to produce the things that I feel great about as an artist. I don't want to be told to produce something that I don't feel connected to. And we do that to other people. So if there's a theater company out there not doing anything about people of color or any other sort of oppressed culture, it's not part of that artistic director's art. I kind of don't want them to do it, because I don't want them to do it badly and irresponsibly. Mm-hmm. I'd rather find a way for us to get our stories told than force someone to tell our story that doesn't really feel connected to it.
Right.
I don't think also, I mean, like, we understand privilege got a lot of people to where they are. Is it right to try to oust them and dethrone them to make space? Or do we try to make space elsewhere? It's a really, really hard question. The only thing I could say is try to appeal to their humanity, try to get them to put a face on the issues you're having. And hopefully they'll come around. And if they don't, then you at least know where you stand with those people. It's hard. I mean, and then uplift those that are actually doing the work. Celebrate the companies and the artists and the schools that are doing the work. But also, we should also know people that are not doing the work are going to die off. I mean, the world is becoming more. I mean, it's not becoming more and more diverse. The dominant culture is starting to. There's other cultures are starting to rise, and so if there are businesses that aren't diversifying, they're going to be dead in 10 years. If there are schools that aren't diversifying, they're going to be losing patronage in the next. I mean, like, even now with this pandemic and how much money schools are losing, they're going to have to rethink their strategies about enrolling students to just keep up with their expenses. And so maybe this is a time for them to reset and go, hey, maybe we cost too damn much. Maybe we need to drop this and get more students in so we can educate everyone. But anyway, that's a tangent.
Yeah. No,
I don't know if I answered
agree.
the question.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. What I find is we can't settle, because there is this evolution that's happening with diversifying the workplace, storytelling, and that's across the board, not just in theater, but in television, which I'm catching up with. There's a lot of diversified television out there, but I don't think we need to rest. We have to keep moving, keep insisting that our stories are being told, because there is a section of our civilization that is just sort of like, oh, well, you go tell that over there, and we're just going to keep doing what we're doing. And I guess that's fine in some places, right? When I hear about actors, auditioning for stuff across the United States and what they're auditioning for and where it is. It's so interesting to me how there are some pockets where they're still doing these traditional mainstream shows, which is fine, but they're not diversifying their cast or keeping everything sort of the same. And I think they feel safe there to do it that way. If there's a Native American in a play, they're going to put any brown person in the middle of nowhere in that role, thinking no one's watching them. And maybe no one is. But it's groups like that I wonder, you got to catch up with the rest of the world, because we are everywhere in one way or another. But what I would say to those actors that are really frustrated, because I do read a lot of negative stuff out there and anger. I mean, I get angry myself. I get angry all the time. just keep going. Just keep trying to tell your stories. And if you can't do it in one place, just do it somewhere else. You got to think outside the box as to how you think your story should be told or how you should be involved. That's what I did when I first moved to this town. There wasn't a lot. I was either Mrs. Gonzalez or Miss Gomez or Miss Wong. I am none of those. I'm not Chinese. I'm not Latinx. I'm not, I was asked if I was, if I could pass for almost black, but I was trying to feed my kid. It was 1990 something, and I was like, sure. Do you think I passed for black? Sure. I hated that I said that, but.
No, I get it. Yeah, totally get it.
I hate that now, but I'm going to be completely honest and open about what I took then. What was I selling out? Was I selling out? I don't know. Times have changed a lot since then, so just keep pushing and try not to be so angry, I say to myself.
I mean, our whole industry is so far behind everything. I was just on two calls earlier, where I'm like, why are we still struggling with streaming our shows? Why are we still struggling with that? I get the idea that when you're in this space, there's a lived experience of being in this space. That shouldn't go away. That won't go away when we allow theaters to stream their shows.
Yeah.
It didn't go away for the sports industry. They didn't suffer from people not coming to see the football game. In fact, they benefited because their marketing got easier. They benefited because now they can do all this corporate fundraising. It only enhances the field, and we're still fighting this. And even like there was a conversation about like, now do I have to teach people how to direct on film? Well, yeah, you do. I mean, like, why are you fighting this sort of thing that's happening?
Yeah.
The question is not, is it going to happen? It's when it's going to happen. And then your decision is, are you going to be ahead or are you going to play catch up the whole time? And I think it's time for us to get ahead. So these unions have to release these rules about streaming, and we got to like start doing it. And talk about accessibility. We all talk about, we want to be accessible. What we do is we give free tickets or discount tickets, which I don't think is the best tactic, because I know I have great friends that don't have a lot of money, but when Beyonce comes, they save their coins and they go to the Beyonce concert.
And they go. Yeah.
So if it's for them and they feel like they're connected, they're gonna come. They're gonna come see it, and so
they're gonna pay it.
Right,
That's
right. And so this whole industry, like the way we do subscriptions, the fact that most of us give discounts to people that can afford to pay full price, those people then buy all the best seats in the house a year and a half in advance, leaving the worst seats in the house for the poor people or the brown and black people sitting sides in the back. So the whole industry is just behind. And I'm hoping that this pandemic that is threatening our whole industry will get us to change our minds about stuff and start getting ahead of the world. I mean, we are a creative industry, and this world right now should be run and ruled by creativity, not at the whim of technology, but creativity should be fueling technology, not the other way around.
Yeah, it's that whole idea of thinking outside the box, right? Because I have a lot of friends as well and colleagues that are mourning that we can't do theater. And I'm, I grew up in the military, moved around a lot. We had to be flexible. I mean, that's just my nature. So I'm transitioning into this new way of presenting theater quite easily. And I've told several people, it's a different way of creating. You got to think outside the box, because we don't know how long we're going to be here. What are you going to do? Sit at home until we're ready to open? I mean, and I've watched all kinds of creative stuff going on out there. It's just, I think it's great. And I think it's temporary. How long temporary? I don't know what that means. But in the meantime, we have to embrace this. We have to be flexible. We can't just lay down and wait for things to happen. We have to be proactive, kind of like what you're saying,
And put the band-aids on the problem. Like, we need to like stop the bleeding, but we also have an opportunity to think strategically about what happens when we are back up and running, and not just recreate the models that we have.
Yeah.
We can't wait for you guys too. I mean, sorry we messed up the world. Sorry you have to fix it, but but we can't wait.
Oh.
We can't wait until you become the leaders. We need to like change now.
Yes.
All right. We have time for one more question. I'm gonna go for this is one of my favorites. Kind of along those same lines. So once we reopen, once we like when we are rebuilding this, where do we need to be focusing our energy to create the greatest change in the industry? Is that on stage? Is that off stage? Where does our passion need to go?
I need to think about that for a second.
For sure. I know.
I think it's in all aspects of what we do. I think not only in the art that we're creating and the stories we're telling. One, I think we need to focus a little bit more on the joys of living because it's so heavy. It's so heavy. It's so heavy. And beyond, even before all this, it's so heavy. But not throw that away, but find the balance. I think the structures and how we build theater companies, even the nonprofit model, I think needs to be redone. The annual budgeting, to do an annual budget to me doesn't make any sense because of how fast the world is moving. To think that you know what's going to happen in a year doesn't make any sense anymore. I think the way we, the subscription model needs to go away. We need to think of some sort of membership model where you pay a monthly fee and get programming all month long. I think the way we build our boards and our staffs, I think the way we, we're doing a lot of team-based projects now as opposed to department-based projects, which is working out a lot better because you get a lot of diversity in thought when you do that. I think that the way we plan our seasons, it doesn't give security to artists, but I tell you, as a producer, to have a season where it starts this date and closes this date is hard because if you have a hit show, you can't extend it because the next show is going to open. And
It's on top of it, yep.
Yeah, similarly, if you have a terrible show, you can't close it early because subscribers have bought tickets for the last weekend. And so that model just doesn't make sense. Now, if we could run shows and run them until they stop having audiences, that will be better. It doesn't give security to artists for being able to book a whole year. But I think that system is gone. I don't know how we can keep doing that. I think we should go to general admission. We shouldn't have tiered seating prices. If we really want to talk about accessibility, anyone should be able to sit wherever they want. And we may
affordable theater.
Yeah, do like the movie theaters where you can still reserve your seat because most people have phones. There is digital privilege, but most people have phones and they can reserve their seat, but there shouldn't be a tiering. There's so many things that I don't know why we aren't doing mobile friendly performances and allow people to bring their cell phones in once or twice a week as an experiment to see how it goes. That to me doesn't make any. The concert world is benefiting greatly from everyone having their cell phones out and recording a little bit and posting it on social media. So
and no one gets in trouble for it.
No one gets in trouble. Why aren't we doing that in theater? There's so many things that we need to rethink and redo to make this industry more essential and more viable and more relevant and not dependent so heavily on contributed revenue and donations, which is coming from one specific type of people, and I'll say it, rich white people, who are determining how the theater runs and operates.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah. God, there's so much to say. I don't know where to start. It's this the world we're living in right now. I keep saying it's a brand new world. We're never going back. It's a brand new world. You got to keep up. It's causing, I work in different groups, right? Different nonprofits, different companies. We're being forced to reassess what we're doing. Like what you're saying, Michael, like what's working, what hasn't worked. How come we haven't stopped to fix it? Because we just keep going. We just keep doing, we pick our seasons, we balance our seasons, we just keep going. We have a schedule. This is forcing, at least from my point of view, forcing us to reassess what the hell are we doing? What have we been doing? And why is this accepted? Why is it accepted that theater makers and creatives and artists are paid far less than the average person? Having lived as a freelance artist for the last 2 years, it's been a struggle. I had a really stable, good paying corporate job I walked away from, happily walked away. I embraced the struggle. I was finally going to struggle in my 50s. Crazy, I know. But I've been so happy. I've never been happier in my life. Not that I don't still get angry, but it's a balance, right? But there have been months where I thought, what the hell am I going to do? Why are we still paid like crap? You know, there's that. Rethinking the model. I think that's a really, really good thing and all of them, like your set schedule, your set build schedule, your casting schedule, oh my gosh, subscribers. I mean, people don't subscribe like they used to. They, not like the old way, right? Affordable theater. Being a single parent, raising my kid, trying to expose her to as much art as possible, museums, theater, concerts. I found every free pass I possibly could. I went on every radio station trying to win every concert ticket I could because I was not paying. I couldn't. She got to see, but I had to be really resourceful, you know? And I'm grateful for that. But I don't know that people know that they can be really resourceful. I don't know if it still exists, but you can go into any library in Boston, in Massachusetts, and get free passes to all the galleries you want in Massachusetts. I don't know if people know that, you know.
Yeah.
Wednesdays, you know, the MFA, it used to be back in the day, you could pay $5 or something like that. When I was a student, in London, I could pay £5 for a ticket, and I could sit just about anywhere I wanted to, depending on what day of the week it was, right? Why do we have to be so resourceful to get access to all those things? Why can't it just be available? You know, why do I have to put my name into a lottery so I can get a $10 Hamilton ticket? Why can't I just walk in and go buy one? It's you know, and I get it. There's costs that you're paying for, but it alarms me who's seeing theater and who doesn't get to. You
Yeah,
know, yeah. Go ahead.
There's a big systemic problem it's all coming from capitalism. It's all coming from consumerism, and those things are determining rules. But at the same time, I also think that it's holding on to an art form that only changes incrementally. You just think about like I try to be entrepreneurial, I try to be business minded, and you think about the word relevance, because I think that word, we've gotten so offended by the fact that we aren't considered essential, but really what we're talking about is relevant. And not that theater is relevant. I mean, most of the people are surviving this quarantine by turning to the arts and turning to music and music and online and Netflix and all that stuff. All that stuff is coming out from the arts. But you think about companies like Kodak, who was like, I'm not going digital no matter what you say. And what happened to Kodak? Think about companies like Sundance, which is struggling to figure out who it is, because it was designed to bring relevance to independent film. Well, independent film is all over the place. Lord of the Rings is an independent film. So does Sundance need to continue being what it is? And I even think about companies like the March of Dimes, which was created to raise money to find a cure for polio. Well, can you imagine if they kept doing that after polio was cured? They had to come up with something else. And I think we need to figure out what the next thing is. And the mission and the why we're doing it needs to determine what new models we put in place, not how much money we're going to make. If it comes from why, which has to be people-centric, then things will work out. And so much we focus on how much money we're going to make, and that's not people-centric. You're
We have to wrap up, but I'd like to ask, is there one thing that you'd like to leave our audience with? So, we're geared towards an Emerson audience, towards young theater artists. Is there any one thing that you'd like to leave with, that you'd like to leave off with?
Do you want to go? You go first, Michelle.
Oh,
you cute doggy.
God, where do I start? Guys, where do I start? Oh, well, first thing comes to mind is, don't stay hopeful. I was going to say, don't give up hope. Stay hopeful. Stay positive, unlike me sometimes. And just keep fighting the good fight, and not just diversity, but just whatever experience you come from. Keep fighting to share that with the world, because I think all our voices need to be heard, because what makes me angry is the lack of empathy for different experiences. I think I find it a lot in theater, and it moves me. That moves me. I think we're a special bunch of people. I feel very lucky to be part of this community. But out there in the real world, I just going to the store lately, right? People are showing their true colors. It's just amazing to me. I don't mean to act naive or surprised. I just have to breathe and take a step back and remember to be kind and be patient. Continue to be patient. Yeah, that's really general, but that's foremost on my mind right now.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I think I'm adding to that. And I maybe in our prep meeting, I talked about this, but I want to absolve or abolish the word ally and allyship, because I think it's a way to absolve yourself from doing something. A lot of people say, I'm an ally, but you don't do anything. And I can tell you the number, right. The number
virtual
of times
signaling.
Exactly. The number of times I've been in a room where someone said some racist, homophobic stuff to me, and my allies just stood there. And then it came to me later on. It was like, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Right. And I'm like, well, where were you?
Why didn't you say anything? You were right there. Yep.
And I think things like what you're doing with this, Tim, is an example of a difference in an ally and an advocate. I think if we abolish the word ally and use the word advocate, advocates do something. They fight, like Michelle was talking about. They really want to change the world. And the responsibility for advocates is to educate yourselves first, so that you know what you're talking about. So you're not just, you're not just like talking. But I just think that to me, for young people, become an advocate. Stop saying ally. Become an advocate. Really do something and do what you know. I mean, if you're an artist, use your art to speak. I mean, I have a certificate in race equity. I know a lot about it. I've had like 5 years of training in it, and I've lived it all my life. And I use what I've learned in my art and as a producer to change the world. I'm not trying to change politics. I'm not trying to change science. I'm using it through my art, and that's how I can advocate for those that don't get heard.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. What a wonderful conversation. I'm moved. I'm inspired. Thank you so much for doing this with us.
Thank you.
Thank
Michelle,
you.
I can't wait to be in a room with all you guys.
I know.
Yeah.
Someday soon.
Someday soon.
All right.
Thank you for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
All right. Take care.